Welcome to another episode of the podcast. We'll see how far I can get into this intro without being interrupted by my children. Um, but this episode was a really good one. I actually had interviewed Tara before, and then it just like didn't save it. So we re-recorded it, and of course, I always believe everything happens as it's meant to and when it's meant to. So this conversation was really, really good, and especially for obviously what we were both experiencing at the time. Tara is an emotion and empowerment coach and the mom of two beautiful boys. Her main passion and purpose is to help others do what she did, transform anxiety, low confidence, and self doubt into lasting unconditional happiness and self love. After transforming her own life through holistic health, mindset, and mindfulness practices and emotional empowerment work, Tara couldn't help but feel called to inspire others to do the same. She has recently launched a new program to do just that, and her next goal is to publish a book on the topic. And you can follow her journey and check out her content on Instagram at It's Tara Swann. Of course, it will be linked down below in the show notes. And I always think it's so beautiful as coaches and healers, the process that we have to go through to help others, to hold space for others, to meet others where they're at. And although sometimes we may be further in our journey, usually the pain of what we actually experienced allows us to really be there for others and to know what they're experiencing, what they're feeling. And I just think it's so beautiful. And that's why I love speaking to people, and hearing their stories and sharing it here, because there really is beauty in the pain. And we don't see it in the moment. We really don't. It's painful in the moment, right? But when we can look in hindsight and really see the hugeness, and I know there's a better word, but that's the word I'm going with right now, and the complexity and the beauty in it, it's just a really powerful experience. And whatever we experience is what we're meant to experience. And it's funny listening back to this. So we actually recorded this in August, and it is now coming out March 2nd, actually. And the shifts and quantum leaps that I have experienced during this time, and I'm sure Tara has also experienced some massive shifts. Last week's episode was all about my journey to sobriety. I've been sober for over 5 months now, and everything has shifted for me. Everything. There's a part of this conversation where I say something about Tara talks about being the observer of your emotions, and I say something in response to that about just still figuring it out, and I get it most of the time, but like not sometimes. And even just in that, the shifts, massive shifts I've experienced. I had to go to the ER today with my dad. He's fine, but he fell playing racquetball and like basically sprained his knee and his back. But I was in the ER with him, and they were coming in with a big MRI machine. And first of all, the connection I have with my body right now is so beautiful. The just being able to discern and feel different things energetically, and being in the hospital and all the frequency and everything that was going around. So I was standing outside of the room while he was getting this MRI scan, and I felt like disassociated with myself. I felt a little buzzy. It wasn't quite deja vu, but it made me think of deja vu, but it was different. If you've ever experienced deja vu, and that sort of like, I perceive deja vu as just being in different layers of consciousness at the same time, different layers of reality, but it wasn't quite like that. And so it was just this multidimensional, like, feeling the frequency that was emitting from all the different devices in the ER, feeling the pain from an empathetic perspective of what my dad was going through, and then just realizing how much stuck energy is in these places. They're so sterile. It's not like they open the windows and sage things out, right? It's just this constant like in and out of energy, and it's not ever quite cleared. And I was able to stand there in observance of what was I was experiencing on a physical level, because my body was physically uncomfortable. My mental body was activated, and that was uncomfortable, but I was able to perceive it from a different perspective. Whereas in the past, going through something like that would have given me so much anxiety that I would have would have like almost launched me to like a mini panic attack, where I was like, I have to leave, I have to move, I have to get out of here. And I didn't experience it in that way. And, we talk in this episode about just like showing up. It's in the little things that the massive transformations happen, right? And so it's like in perceiving these, like showing up for yourself in the little shifts that you have daily, then being able to be like, wow, I handled that situation so much differently than I ever would have in the past. And it was a beautiful thing. And even being able to discern what, because I'm sitting in meditation now and I'm going through the different layers of my body, right? I sit in my physical body for a moment. I sit in my emotional body for a moment. I sit in my mental body for a moment. And then I sit in my spiritual body for a moment. And then I realign all of them and I clear all of them out. And so being able to do that every single day and really becoming familiar with what those different energies feel like. And one aha moment that I got too was that now, as I'm becoming aware and becoming familiar, right before I quit drinking, I would feel this like buzziness, but on the outside. It was like I at the time I was just like my aura, I guess, right? Because it was like on my skin, but it was like sort of like vibrating on the outside. And now I understand that was my emotional body being activated. And so, which makes so much sense because I would get so emotional and I would get so angry and I would get frustrated and I would get sad and I would all of the emotions that would come up. And I don't quite experience that anymore because I am able to really discern like what's being activated and why, and having the tools to come back to myself and to allow myself to process through it. But I think this conversation was really beautiful. And of course, in hindsight, seeing where I was at and where I am now was also really cool. And we talk about towards the end of the podcast, we talk a lot about relationships and lessons that we've learned in relationships, and having that self trust. And that for me has shifted so much. Now I trust my body 100%. I even if it doesn't make sense, right? It's just, yeah, it's wild. It's crazy. And I'm not, in reflecting, so I'm a fearful avoidant attachment style. And I know that when I'm not in relationship, be relatively I can be relatively emotionally neutral, coming from a neutral space, more or less. Like I still cycle through things. Of course, I still have my emotional highs and lows because I have emotional authority and I'm an emotional being. But I have awareness, I think, so much of my patterns, and I have the tools and the practices set into place that when I am triggered, I'm able to cycle through and understand, and go from that lens. On what day was it? Friday. I went to go out. I was going to go out to just like a little coffee shop in Dallas and just do some work because I had the day off. And I was just, I was in a low for sure. And I was cycling through something from the past that was really weird. And the closer I got to Dallas, the more I just had this like heavy feeling inside me. I was like, and so I literally ended up driving to Dallas and then driving home the whole time, like in this space. But and at the time I was like, what is this? Like, why am I doing this? What is this telling me? Like, what's the purpose of all this? And I think it was just to cycle through something that was coming up that I wasn't allowing the space to. Cause like when you're in the car and you're driving, I mean, there's not much you can do but think or listen to music or a podcast, which I usually listen to podcasts, but I didn't do that. I was just like allowing myself the space to go through that. So that was really interesting. But having that self trust and having that awareness to be able to cycle through it. And then yeah, it was just really interesting. So yeah, this conversation was really cool and just reflecting, and um yeah, it was just really, really great conversation about emotional awareness, self-awareness, all of the things that go with it. And yeah, so you can follow Tara on Instagram. All the information is down in the show notes for how to contact her, how to be in what how to connect is really the word I'm looking for. How to connect with her. And I just want to take a moment too. So HD Decoded is a membership space that I have opened up. It officially starts March 21st, but I have opened it up early. We're kind of having like a bonus month. You're going to get, if you sign up before March 21st, you'll get a one-on-one session, a 30-minute one-on-one session with me, human design session. There's HD 101 workshop that is available within the membership space. You get absolutely free for being in there. And the theme for this month, because it's something that's been coming up for me as I've been like looking through my chart, is rising sign and chart ruler. We're diving into that this month. There's a downloadable in there. So all the things every month is going to be just a different layer of your human design, which of course astrology is a piece in that. And just literally piece by piece, because my process with human design was like, dove in so deep. And every time I hold session with somebody, at the end of it, the question is always, where do I go from here? Like, how can I integrate this information? What do I look into from here? I like to empower clients to know and learn how to integrate this information themselves. I want them to, after our session, take that information and then be able to integrate and continue to learn human design on their own. And so this was sort of a space that was created based off of that question, like, where do I go from here? Right. So it is going through your design layer by layer. And of course, I'm an MG, so everything is always shifting. And I'm sure, as will the membership space, but it is a space where we can grow together, integrate together, learn together. The very first month where it officially open, is going to be type strategy and authority is sort of what we're going to be cycling through during that time. And then just going on from there, we're going to go through the sun, the moon, all the things, and just really, really dig in. And it's each theme is a month because I really want the time to contemplate, to ask questions, to go through it when we have our meetups, and really just really integrate and learn and embody all this information, because it's been a beautiful, beautiful process. Um, and then, of course, you can do just a one-off human design session, and then HD Attached is a 12-week program that integrates human design and attachment theory. So we go through your design, we uncover your core wounds, we reprogram your subconscious. You're left with tools to do that. And so it's a 12-week program, and it has been such a beautiful process for those who have moved through it, and the feedback has been great. So that all of that information is down in the show notes, ways that you can work with me. I am also, you will start to hear me more talk about it. I have not yet received it, but there is a device, if you've ever heard of it, called the Healy. And I have been watching somebody that I look up to specifically in the astrology space. Um, I think I don't remember. She was taught, literally, she posted something on Instagram about quantum healing sessions. And I was like, what? And so I messaged her then, and I was like, what is this? Like, this just sounds like incredible. And so she was going to someone for these sessions and then found this device called Healy. And it's essentially the same technology as quantum healing device. And essentially what it does is it scans your energy, your frequency, and it emits frequencies that you specifically need in certain situations. And I went through my wave and I cycled through it, and I waited and I waited and I waited. And of course, like, watching the community behind the scenes, really, really, my goal and my everything this year is community. So of course, which is so aligned why I created the membership community space. And for me, being part of community that is going to support me and be aligned to where I'm at too is really, really important. And so that was speaking to me. So I finally went all in, as I do. I'm a all or nothing type of person. And so I went all in, and well, actually, by the time this episode comes out, I will have had it, but I have not yet received it. But I'm so excited to just like experiment with this and see what it does. And of course, with my dad now hurting his knee, I'm like, oh, he's going to need this too. We're going to try it on him. So I'm just like so excited for this. So keep an ear out, and an eye out for all of that information, what's going to come. And, yeah, I'm just amazed by the technology. And so I'm so excited to see what it has to offer and see what it does. So that is my intro. um, all the information is down in the show notes. Go follow Tara at It's Tara Swann, and Swann is SANN. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Rochelle.Christian. That's ROCHELLE.CHRISTIANE. And then website is RochelleChristian.com. All the information is down there. Sign up for the Mastery Monday newsletter. Goes out every single Monday. Get your human design chart on my website as well. You will also get an email series that really helps you with the basics of human design. So it's a 5 email series uncovering the basics. And then you get the Radical Self-Love for Design ebook. It is awesome. Like, I put so much of my love into it. People are loving it, and it has space for journaling. It's got affirmations, all the things in there. So that's all the ways that you can work with me, hear from me, keep in contact with me, all of it. So everything is in the show notes. Again, thank you so much, and I will catch you on the other side. All right. Well, welcome back to the Emotional Mastery Podcast. Today I have Tara Swann. We recorded this episode a week or two ago, and for whatever reason, it just did not save. So I'm trusting and believing that this conversation today is going to be even more powerful because our last conversation was absolutely beautiful. Tara is an emotional empowerment coach, and I would love for you to just start and tell the listeners, as much or as little as you'd like about your story and how you got to be a coach and, anything pivotal along the way.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for being flexible and having me back on here to re-record this. It was a really awesome conversation last time, and I'm excited to have the conversation again. And like you said, hopefully it's even more powerful. So yeah, like you said, I'm an emotional empowerment coach, and the reason I got into that is because for most of my life, I struggled with chronic anxiety and depression. And that showed up in many forms in my life. It also manifested into my physical health as well. Like I had multiple health issues back when I was 23 years old. But I struggled with chronic anxiety and depression for most of my life, right up until I was 31. And I'm 34 now. So like it's been a powerful 3 years of transformation for me. Um, but yeah, like the reason that I am an emotional empowerment coach now is because what I've experienced in the last 3 years, like everyone should have the opportunity to do that. Yeah.
Mhm. And what specifically is it about the emotional aspect that was pulling to you? I know you mentioned anxiety and depression and things. So how is it that healing the emotions kind of ties into everything?
Yeah. So I tried many things. Like I've seen quite a few therapists, and was actually offered medication. I knew on some level that it wasn't my path, that I wasn't meant to go on medication. So I never actually went down that road, but I tried different things. Like I definitely took a holistic approach. So overcoming anxiety for me was like through mindfulness, through healing my physical health and eating really well, nourishing my body, because our gut and our mind are directly connected. But the most powerful transformation for me in healing my anxiety was releasing emotions. So like I believe anxiety is like, we know that it's worried about something that could potentially go wrong in the future, or stressed about something that happened in the past. But I do believe that the reason we're stressed about something happening in the future is because we're holding on to something that happened in the past. So a lot of the time, releasing emotions, they're emotions that we've suppressed from our experiences that we've been through in the past. And when we can actually feel those through and release them, we're free from that, and we can start living in the present moment, which is where you find your peace, your contentment, your happiness.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I've found it's always interesting, especially like us re-recording this, because even though it was like a week, maybe 10 days ago, my like mindset today is so different from what it was then, and it's so much about that emotion, the emotions, right? Because I believe, we'll get into human design. I'm an emotional manifesting generator. So like literally when you have emotional authority, your emotions paint it's the lens from which you view from, right? And so from a space now where, because I feel like the last time we talked, I was going through an emotional wave, like really heavy. And we like kind of talked a little bit offline about some things that I would like to, if you're willing to share, like kind of have that conversation more online here. But coming from a more neutral space, I feel like sometimes, like, yes, it is the emotions, but I think a lot of it is the mind, right? So when we talk about like releasing our emotions and regulating our emotions, it's almost as much as regulating the mind. And like, how do you find that balance between like letting the ego do its thing, but then like kind of coming back and regulating those emotions? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. For me, like from my perspective, the mind is connected to emotions. So your thoughts are attached to feelings. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Your thoughts are attached to feelings. So when you've got those things happening in your mind, a lot of the time it is attached to emotion. Um, but yeah, it's sometimes you do need to step back and become the observer of what's happening in your mind, rather than allowing it to control you. So if you've got stories coming through your mind, if you've got thoughts going on, that are making your anxiety worse, or just making things harder for you, then yeah, it is about observing what's going on and just noticing it there, instead of allowing it to control you and actually create the story that's playing out in your life. like
Mhm.
separate that and recognize as well, like every thought that you have is triggering an emotion in your body. And as well, if you've got emotions in your body, they can create the stories and the thoughts that are going on in your mind. So in releasing those emotions, you can also find clarity on your thoughts and clear. You can be more clear minded. So yeah, it's all connected.
Mhm. Yeah, I studied holistic health as well. I studied gut health, and it's really interesting. Yeah, that mind gut connection is so powerful. And when you look at like the chakras, the emotional solar plexus rules the gut, right? So it just like it naturally like makes sense that the whole like system is just influencing like each other as it goes. I know personally, and I think, and it's interesting. Like so many people experience emotions in so many different ways, right? Like I have people in my life that aren't that emotional, and I'm just like, it like blows my mind because I'm just like, how do you? I feel like it took me a long time to like come to peace and find the beauty in being so emotional, right? Because like it doesn't feel good, right? Like it causes anxiety. And again, I think that that's a big mind thing. But then when you can kind of pull back and like find the beauty in actually being able to experience the depth of that, I think it is a beautiful thing. But I kind of want to dig in a little bit. You talk about like becoming the observer. And this is something I chased for the longest time. Like I could not like understand how I could do that. I feel like I've gotten like kind of a grip on it now and I have like tools, but I would love if you wanted to share like like what that means and like what your journey was with that and then any tools that you have like in the moment to be able to like witness and observe rather than just like become.
Yeah, I think what actually helped me was, well, there's a couple of things. So one was definitely sitting in meditation is one, and just like that can help you practice becoming an observer, because you notice the thoughts that are coming into your mind and you just kind of let them go, and you notice them coming in and you let them go, and you're just observing without judgment, without any like ridicule towards yourself. You're literally just observing what's going on in your mind, and that way you can become really aware. Um, but yeah, one of the things that I used to do was like almost imagine myself stepping out of my body and just noticing what was going on within me, as opposed to living in it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, oh, there was another thing I was going to say
Mhm.
there. Now it's gone.
Yeah. Well, I know like for me too, like you talk about stepping out and then kind of like for me sometimes where like when the ego gets loud and the mind gets loud, I sometimes visualize it as like my inner child, right? Because it's
Yeah,
like it is that like small like fragile being, that child that like doesn't really understand the depth of like life yet, right? But it's pulling a fit because it's not seen, it's not heard. And I'm reading The Surrender Experiment. Have you read that one?
no, I haven't, not
It
yet.
Yeah, I love it. It's so beautiful. But there's one part where he talks about for a good chunk of the book, he just his whole like he's just trying to get the ego to be quiet, to just he locks it in a room and he like meditates and this and then he realizes he has like a dream or something and then he realizes that like he has to integrate that part of himself. He can't just like shut it up and set it aside, and he like just describes like opening the door and like putting his hand into this ego, and the ego just like started sobbing because all it wants to do is to be seen and heard. And I just like got so emotional. I was like, that is like so beautiful. And it's like, how can you, yeah, like still witness it and observe it, integrate it, but let it, you know what I mean, like but not let it like take over. And it can be like, of course our minds make it so complicated, but it's just like getting to that space of like that. It was just like an aha moment where I was like, yeah, like it is just, I think our ego is just trying to protect us, but it is the stories we tell each other, like or tell ourselves on repeat, that gets so like exhausting.
Yeah, I think our mind, it's like its job is to keep us safe, right? And we're always going to be like our ego is always going to be there telling us different things. Um, and I think it is really powerful to kind of just let it in, like instead of trying to push it down, suppress it, control it, like befriending that side of you and knowing that it's there, but being really aware of what's true and what's not true. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, what are you telling yourself? And is that actually true? And if it's not, you can let it go. Um, but the thing is, when you have these beliefs as well in your subconscious, um, you will start creating things that almost reinforce that belief. So as well, like there is a process for shifting beliefs so that you actually create different circumstances in your reality. So there's a whole process behind that, but yeah, just befriending that and knowing that it's there, and I think the more we try and control that side of us, the more we feel out of control. So if we can let it in, know that it's there, understand and realize what's true and what's not true, um, yeah, then we can, then that's I guess the definition of becoming the observer of it, I
Mhm.
guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said before, the inner child, we all have that inner child. There is a reason these thoughts show up in our minds. There's a reason these beliefs show up. There's a reason we have these emotions, and most of the time it is because of our inner child that wasn't seen or heard. And it's up to us as the adult version of ourselves to nurture that side of ourselves, to really hold space for that side of ourselves that didn't have their needs fully met as a child. And I think this applies to everyone. Even if you had a beautiful upbringing, there are sometimes it can be subtle things in your childhood that have left you with an imprint in your subconscious that is playing out in your life now.
Mhm.
So yeah, when you start delving into that work, that side of the work, you can understand what is true and what's not true, and actually shift that side of yourself, nurture that side of yourself, so that you can behave differently in your adult life now.
Mhm. And what does that work look like to you? Like what has become your practice in really like getting in touch with that?
Oh, I mean, I'm so committed to this. Like I do something every day, something for myself every day. There are so many things you can do depending on what you're wanting to work on first. There are so many different practices. But like I guess my at the moment, like the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is just drop into my body and be like, is there anything that needs shifting this morning? How am I feeling this morning? And like, am I entering this day in the right sort of balanced state? Like, is my energy right? And I sort of work on that first, and then I will do some meditation. And I every morning I journal. I have a committed journaling practice, and I free write. I ask myself like what I want to work on for that day, what I would want to achieve for that day, what it would feel like to have that, and I get into the space of like the energy of what it is that I desire for that day or that week or that month or whatever. So my journaling practice kind of sets me up for the day, gets me in the right energy, sets the tone for the day. And it's funny, like if different things come up, I'll try different things. If I've got like a belief that needs shifting or an emotion that needs moving, I'll try different things for those. So there's different things that I integrate every day. But yeah, at the moment, that's kind of my morning routine to get me into the right energy for the day. And it's funny, like a client asked me last week, what did she ask me? How do you build your self worth? And to me, it is in the things that you do for yourself every single day. It's in committing to yourself and showing up for yourself and choosing you over everyone else, not choosing you every single day and honoring yourself and your truth. And it's in those little practices that you build your self worth. It's like when you, to me, like that first hour or two of the day is just for me. And that's like my statement to the universe that I am worthy of everything that I would love in my life. And I
Mhm.
think, yeah, it's really important to honestly committing to yourself and your inner work is the only way that you build your self-worth, your confidence, and love for yourself.
Yeah. I completely agree, and I have committed to it so hard too, and I feel like sometimes, like, I can never just, like, experience an emotion and just let it go, right? Which is the end goal, right? Just, like, actually process it. But I find myself, like, constantly like, I gotta like, I want to figure it out, right? Because, like, the only way, like, we can change is if we actually change, right? But so many of us are just come back to this space of comfort because that's what we're conditioned to do, right? Like, that's what's kept us safe, that's what's shown us over and over. And like sometimes I feel like it can be frustrating with like doing all the mental work, right? It's like I have the awareness, I have the this, I have the that, and I literally watch myself like repeat an old pattern. And it's like I know exactly why I'm doing it, right? Because it feels safe. But then I'm like, and it can be really frustrating. But I was listening to something today and it was just like, even just like you said, like just showing up every single day and committing to doing it, like you are going to make changes. And I think sometimes we think it has to be this one massive like fuck you to the world, I'm changed, right? But it's like I think like the more the bigger, right, is those gradual day-to-day things. Like if you like of course like hindsight is 2020, but like if I was confronted by something now and confronted by something 5 years ago, my reaction now is wildly different,
Oh,
right? But
yeah.
it wasn't one specific situation that I like was, felt like I was so courageous and I did the thing and now I'm like freed. It was just like all these little things. And I think like we so often want this like quick fix. That's our culture, that's society. It's like we have to be, aggressive and assertive and so masculine in our healing even, right? Like
Yeah.
even in yeah, like I said, like even just trying to like understand everything, sometimes I'm just like, whoa, I'm so far out of like I'm not even integrating like my feminine here. I'm not giving myself compassion or gentleness. Like I'm like, we got to figure this out now. It like doesn't work that way. So I think I love that, that committing every single day. Cause even sometimes it doesn't fully feel like you're making progress or anything is changing, but in just showing up in some way for yourself every day, like makes such a change.
Yeah, absolutely, and I love what Gabby Bernstein says, subtle shifts for radical
Mm,
change.
mm,
It's so true. Like there's no such thing as a quick fix. The closest thing I've had to a quick fix is releasing emotions. There was an instance where I was able to heal my anxiety around speaking in one day by releasing emotions from my past. That was the closest thing I had to a quick fix. But there was also a lot of things leading up to that point for me to feel safe enough to sit there and release that
mm,
emotion. So it wasn't like just an instant quick fix. I had to do a lot of work to get to that point to be able to do that.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like too working with like energy healers and I absolutely believe in like the cord cutting and all these kind of things like they work in combination with other things. And I do and I think some people may have that aha moment, right? But like you said, I think we also don't see everything that's built up to that moment. So it's like you may see somebody at like an ayahuasca ceremony that's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm freed from all this stuff," right? But it's like what pain and like what have you gone through to like get here now? Or like what were the
Yeah.
lessons? So, yeah, I love that. I think that's beautiful. I was listening to Joe Dispenza on YouTube today, it like randomly popped up, but he was talking about meditation. And it was just saying, exactly what we're talking about, right? Those like subtle shifts every day. And he's like, even in meditation, right? You have those moments where like the phone buzzes or the dog barks or you want to go make the coffee, but it's like, in order to rewire your brain, what are you doing in those moments? Are you getting up and making the coffee or are you just committing to the 20 minutes that you said you're going to sit there? Because that happens to me all the time. Like I was sitting here last night, in meditation and my son walked in and I was just like, okay, I can get frustrated right now and walk up and like deal with him or I can like continue to commit to it. But also, something that dropped in during that moment was like, you are more in meditation when you're present with your kids than here being frustrated by them walking around the room. And I was
Yeah.
like, that in itself, I was just like, damn. And I had taken a microdose. So I like microdose before I meditate sometimes. But I just feel
Yeah.
like I get those downloads so much easier, when it happens. But I don't know. I like sometimes I feel like I'm still figuring out all the nuances of everything, right? But it's kind of like coming back to ourselves and trusting what is true for us because we're all so different.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess like that's like you said, it's rewiring your brain in those moments. Like what are you choosing every single day? What are you doing for yourself every single day? Like if you really want to improve and rewire your brain so that you are living in a state where you're more in love with your life, more in love with yourself, like you have to take that time to rewire your brain to be that way. And for me, like to get to this point of being on podcast, which was something I would never do a few years ago, like it's taken me 3 years of committing to myself and doing something for me every day. And
Mm.
like that 3 years has gone really fast. It sounds like a long time for people, but you have wins throughout all of that time. And so you actually really enjoy that entire unfolding. I've got so many steps to go, so far to go. And I love that. I love that I'm not there. I don't think there is any there. Like life is about growing and evolving. And if you can see it like that, you can really enjoy where you're at now and enjoying the unfolding of where you're going. As soon as you get to that next place, you're going to want to go to another place too. So just like enjoy that entire process because that's what it's about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been diving into the gene keys a lot more, and if you're familiar with it, but I don't know. Richard Rudd has such a beautiful way of describing just energy and the gates and things like that. But I was reading about Gate 43 today. I don't. Do you know? Are you familiar enough with your design to know if you have that?
Not really. Like I did have a reading, but
Mm-hmm.
not 100% sure on the gates side of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, I mean, just kind of like astrology, right? Like we all have everything within us. So whether you have it activated or not, you're going to experience it in some level, like somewhere in your life, right? Through a transit, through a spouse, through a child, like we come into these energies. But it was just like, for me, it's like, it's my, my personality earth. So it's literally like the triggers, like when I'm in a trigger, this shadow is what's always going to come up until I can like face it and deal with it. Right. But it was just like so powerful. It's basically like deafness, right? It is the shadow, but it's in a sense of like the mind not being able to deal with not having an answer, and like how much chaos, like mental chaos. And he almost talks about like mental illness, right? Because it can make you like psychotic almost sometimes. And I know when I'm, whether it's in a relationship and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I'm getting the answer that I want, right? Like how much our minds can like completely like spin off with those stories, and like
Mm.
not be able to let it rest of like, well, no, but I need this in black and white, right? Like at what point can we just be like, no, I don't need to know the answer, like I think like there's so much work to come into it. And I think that's where it's so beautiful, like regulating your emotions, right? Or having an emotional empowerment coach that's in your corner that can like help you through these things, right? So what do you recommend? Like, say you're in a trigger, like how would you guide somebody to kind of come back to that neutral space and actually release the emotions? Because it really, like, our emotions don't last for that long. We just don't want to face them fully. So how do you like feel safe enough to go through that and move it?
Yeah, first of all, you do need to feel safe in releasing your emotions. And it's understandable if you don't, because we're taught from a really early age, like in childhood, to push down those negative emotions or those bad emotions. Like, I don't believe emotions should be labeled for good or bad or like positive or negative. Like, because what they are is energy, and when you can see them for that, you can face them all so much more confidently, I guess. But it's in embracing all of those emotions and knowing that you're safe to feel all of those emotions, that you can move through those triggers. Um, I love being triggered. I really love being triggered now, because it's like, oh, amazing. I've got this huge opportunity. It's an opportunity to face the part of you that is not healed yet within you. And so when you're triggered, if you can step back, don't like, try not to react to that person or that thing that's triggered you without reacting to it. You can come back to you and be like, I'm really grateful that this is showing up for me right now. I'm grateful that I'm being triggered right now. What is it within me that is being triggered? um, and if you can drop into your body, you can actually feel the emotion that's coming up for you. It's coming up in some way in your body, whether it's tightness in your chest or in your stomach or wherever. I was triggered a couple of weeks ago, and I handled it so much differently than what I used to. So if I used to, a couple of years ago, if I was triggered, I would start reacting. I'd get angry at that person or like frustrated or whatever. Um, but this time I was able to just take a moment, step back from everything that I was doing, and go and experience that emotion for what it was. And it was a few emotions that had come up for me that I actually didn't realize I'd suppressed from a past relationship. Um, and so, yeah, as I was triggered, I took that time for myself. And this is another statement of like, I am worthy of taking this time for myself, right? Like saying, like, this is another way you show up for yourself every day. But I took that time and I went and cried it out, and I had frustration and anger towards myself as well. So I like, I was hitting my bed and screaming into my bed, and like, as I was doing that, yeah, it was uncomfortable, but at the same time, I was really grateful for it, because I'm like, I love this release, because I know, and I've released enough emotions to know that once that has been released, there is this like, I can't even explain exactly the feeling, but it's like you just this complete calmness and complete groundedness. And um, like, after taking a few breaths after releasing those emotions, it's like you just step into this empowered state, and that thing no longer has a hold on you. You cannot be triggered by it anymore because you've released it. So um, yeah, I think if you can go into, like, when you're triggered, if you can go into, allow yourself to feel all the emotions that are coming up for you in a safe space, with the full knowing that what follows is absolute freedom, then you can be grateful for that showing up for you and move through it. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's the word that was coming to mind, was freedom. Because it feels like when you are so, especially when your mind gets involved, right? You're so like trapped in that trigger and the stories that feels like you're imprisoned, like in your own body. And so being able to like actually process and release that is really powerful. I just like I That's like a practice I've kind of recently started doing, is just when I find myself going off in these stories, I'm kind of pulling it then to my body and just be like, where am I feeling this? Because
Mhm.
it kind of lets the mind just like focus on something else or relax a little bit, right? So then it's like, where am I feeling this? And then just like the other day I was in the shower and I was like, I could feel something and it was like in my throat right there. So I just like pulled myself into my throat and I just let myself cry, you know? And I was just like, just cry and just kind of held myself and then moved on, right? But it's like if I had just sat there and be like, don't worry about it, like we have to get ready for the day, and not given myself that 2 minutes of tears, like my entire day probably would have been me in my mind, like just repeating because I didn't actually fully feel it. So yeah, it's really powerful.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and when you can allow yourself that time to actually move through it like that and cry it out, yeah, it is. It's the kindest thing you can do for yourself, I think,
Mhm.
because when we push it down, it's going to continue to play out in different forms in your life, and it can manifest in so many ways, whether that's like emotional reactivity, anxiety, like different mental health issues, or even physical health issues. Like I have psoriasis, and I've had flare ups because I haven't fully processed emotions. And in releasing emotions, I've been able to really help my psoriasis as well. So it can show up in so many different ways.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that unprocessed emotions get trapped in our body. And like anytime I'm talking to somebody, just my mind never stops. I'm so like, not that I'm gonna fix the world, but I love to empower people to like think beyond what they think it could be, right? Instead of just like going to the doctor and like slapping a band-aid on it, which like yes, also do that. Like not like telling people just to never go to the doctor, but also like there's so much deeper meaning behind like what our body is telling us. It's like anybody is like telling me like, oh, my shoulder hurts or, my knee hurts today. And I'm just like, what are you unprocessed? What is the thing like, right? It's something like, have you felt angry lately that you shoved down? Or like, is this like decades worth of like people pleasing and like catering to your parents that you never like stood up to? Right. Like, I think there's so much more beyond. And it's like, again, yes, take the medical steps to like heal yourself, but also like do the inner work to make sure it doesn't come back, right? Because it's like you can have the surgery and you can have the pills, but if we're not doing the inner work, it's going to keep presenting itself because it wants to be seen, right? It wants to like come out and be processed and released.
Yeah. So, like, if anyone listening has something that's been repeating in their lives, something that continues to show up no matter how many times they think they've worked on it or how many things they've tried, like, look into energetics and how you can actually heal your body energetically. Because, to be honest, that's probably what it is. There's probably some sort of trauma or trapped emotion stored in your body that has not been fully processed. And when you can release that, you'll probably find it'll make the world a difference.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm a huge believer of Western meets Eastern medicine. I think using them
Yeah.
in combination is just so powerful. Um,
Yeah.
I'd love to like backtrack just for a second, just because now we're kind of talking about this, but you had said that you went through a phase of like, or a point where you were offered medication, right, to deal with the anxiety and things like that, and you chose not to. What was going on? What was the mindset, and why did you choose not to versus to, right? Because like I feel like sometimes when I can get pretty low sometimes throughout my life. It's like to the point where it's just I'm learning to enjoy the beauty of the depth of it, like I said, but there are some times where I'm just like, I literally like hate it. It just feels so bad, right? And I'm like, is this normal? Should I be getting help for this? But then I'm always come back to that, like, okay, let me just meditate. Let me like pull out the tools. Let me go run, right? So I'm always curious, like, I know like why I choose not to. Um, and maybe one day I will, but I would love to for you to share your story.
Yeah. It was such a long time ago that I was offered the medication, and I think for me, like, I never felt connected to my intuition at all. I felt so disconnected from who I really was that I was like, I don't what is intuition? Like, what are people talking about? I don't like, yeah, it was just all foreign to me. But when I think about it, I really do think that was my intuition telling me that that wasn't my path. Everything that has happened to me in my life up to this point has led me to this point in exactly what I'm doing now. And um I love that. Like, I'm grateful for the entire journey, as painful as it was for like most of my life. But right in that moment, I think I just, on some level, I knew that it wasn't for me, and I didn't want to become dependent on that either. Like, there was always a part of me that was like, "No, I there's gotta be another way because I don't wanna be dependent on this medication." And I think that was my main thought process at the time was I just don't wanna become dependent. Um, and yeah, I think yeah, that's probably it.
Mhm. How did you build that relationship with your intuition?
Yeah, the just all the inner work, like the
Mhm.
last 3 years, like, honestly, stripping back who I thought I should be, stripping back the conditioning, releasing emotions, coming back to my own values and what was true for me, um, just honestly reconnecting to myself at a core level and following what was true and good for me. In by doing all of that, I could understand what was and wasn't for me, and I could start using my emotions as guidance as well. Like, if I was to be faced with something, I could drop into my body and literally, like, what does this feel like for me? What does it feel like to take this option, option A or option B? And like, you just know when you are so connected to who you really are at a core level, underneath all of the bullshit that we're taught throughout our
Mhm.
lives, um, you just know, you have a knowing whenever you need to make a decision, like, if you can just come back to you and what's true for you, like, I think that's to me, that's connecting with your intuition.
Mm. Yeah. I learned, because yeah, when I first I had no idea what it was, right? I was like, I'm not intuitive. Everybody else, these people are, but I definitely am not because I don't trust myself, right? And it is also building that trust, like you had said too.
Mm,
And like kind
yeah,
of what you had said to your point earlier about like giving yourself the space to like go cry and like release your angers and your emotions, that is enhancing your self-worth, right? Because you're giving yourself that time, right? And so
mm,
I think the same with intuition, I've learned at least that it's just like it's in those little things, right? That you're like trusting. And it's interesting. There's just like have been like some really random ones lately that have come up. Like I was at work and I was randomly thinking about this person that I wasn't even close to. Like worked with them like a year ago, never thought about them since, but randomly this person popped into my mind like at, I don't know, 10 o'clock in the morning. And then like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they like come into my work to talk to the manager. And I was like, you cannot make that up. Like, why would I have thought about that person? Right?
yeah,
No, nobody I was close to. And then there I had plans. I had plans like last week. And like a few days before, I knew. I was like, it's not gonna happen. But of course, my mind was like trying to convince myself, oh, you can manifest it. Like try and go against that like inner knowing. But yeah, there is like there's so many points in my life when I look back and I'm like, I knew before the thing ever happened or didn't happen. I just knew.
yeah,
And yeah, I think again, it comes back to the mind, right? Our mind wants to make sense of it. I want this to know this and the whole like logical part of it. And it's beautiful in its own way, but also just like being able to trust that what comes
yeah.
through and just flow with it. And I think that's the beautiful part of life that we just, kind of start flowing with.
Yeah, I think trust is definitely the biggest thing. I think we're always connected to our intuition. It's just that maybe we're not connected to ourselves enough and trust
Mhm.
ourselves enough to actually use it,
Mhm.
or actually know what it is. Because you're like you said, there's been so many times in my life as well, like where I look back and you do know, like you have that knowing, but you are so disconnected that you don't know how to trust that, or you don't trust yourself enough to trust that at the time. And I guess that's another way to actually build your intuition as well, is look back at those times and be like, okay, I don't believe I'm intuitive now, but there has been this instant in my life where I kind of knew that that was going to happen. There's been this instance, and use that as evidence that you are intuitive. And then as you start reconnecting to that more, you can start recognizing it more going forward.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think kind of what we had gotten into it after our episode last time. We're talking a little bit about relationships, and I think it's really interesting because I feel like I can feel empowered and I can trust my intuition in so many ways, and I'm getting there. It's always a work in progress. But there's something about, and I think because there's trauma around it, right? Like something about relationships when I get in and it's like all the signs are right there. but like, I'm like, no, I can't believe it. Like my mind is like, but I feel this way. How can, and like, sometimes like I laugh, but it's like, I do believe I've come to believe that we do have like ties to people because like sometimes we meet somebody and there's just like this wild connection, and I'm just like, but then there's nothing, right? Like there's nothing from the other side, or there's no like long term thing, or there's no commitments, or there's this, that, and other thing. And like I've done like in more recent times, I've done like meditations where I've kind of looked at the soul connection and like understood on a, you know, spiritual level what that connection means. But yeah, I just think it's so easy to abandon ourselves in times when we're feeling activated or our nervous system is activated in relationships because we want to make sense of it or we want the thing to happen. And it's so it yeah, it's just so hard sometimes to just like trust what we're feeling and what we know to be true and just being like, you know, what's meant to be will be and we can move on and there's going to be other people out there for us, you know? How do
Yeah.
you like process through that? If that affects you in that way, you know, I know that that's always my hardest thing to trust myself in relationships.
Yeah, it's relationships are our biggest mirrors sometimes, right? Like they're going to bring up so many things. It's beautiful, really. Like I have been through a massive transformation again just in the last 8 months in a relationship that I was in. We're no longer seeing each other, but like there were so many things mirrored back to me that I had to heal through. So many things that were brought up from my past traumas that I was still holding on to that I had the opportunity to release. And I think like there wasn't like I can definitely relate to what you're saying, absolutely, and it stems back to childhood as well, and what we view as love and what we view as like a healthy relationship based on what we were taught by our parents or by in our earliest relationships. And for me, like I went through like had a lot of relationship trauma, um, and I've done a lot of work around this area around this as well, but I'll give you an example of when I should have listened to my intuition, probably. I don't regret anything. I think it's all a beautiful learning curve. But in this past relationship, like we did end it back in April. And after a day or two of processing my emotions around it, I felt really free. I was like, oh, this feels so good. I feel so good. I'm so excited for what's next. And then he messages me.
It's always that test, right? That like one last, are you really sure?
Yeah, exactly. It was a
Yeah.
test.
Yeah.
Um, oh, and I started seeing him again. And it wasn't a bad thing. Like we have such a beautiful time together. But at the same time, like I could have held on to that free feeling, that happy feeling of like excited about what's to come. Um, but I did end up, so it was just like that draw back. And it's like on some level, I think there was a part of me that needed to feel almost wanted to feel worthy. And so, and that has been the pattern that's played out in my life for a really long time, of which I've like pretty much worked through now. Obviously, it's an ongoing process, but yeah, that's probably one time that my intuition did show up for me. Like it was a knowing that I should have probably stayed single at that point, but at the same time, yeah, it was that test that showed up.
Yeah. But did you re-enter it knowing what you were doing, like with awareness of the pattern you were repeating?
Yeah, I had awareness. Not necessarily on the pattern I was repeating. I had awareness on like, awareness of the knowing that I should probably stay single at that point because I did feel really good in where I was. I didn't necessarily know that I was repeating a pattern until later on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I resonate with that. I was in relationship, and I air quote it because it wasn't like a relationship, but I think anybody we exchange energy with, we are in relationship with in some way. But so anyway, with someone for like a couple of years, and I just it was in hindsight, right? I can see like the pattern that was repeating on my end for sure. Just like, yeah, that wanting to be wanted, wanting to be cared for. And I wasn't getting it. But like when we were together, it was beautiful, right? Like you said, like that experience. But when we weren't together, I was triggered so hard, like so hard. And if anyone listening is familiar with human design, this person had 39 in their conscious sun, which is the gate of provocation, right? And then I have gate 55 in my unconscious Venus, which is the gate of the spirit, the self, right? So these two are just like It's like they were pulling each other. It's like the provoking to see something within myself, right? I always like kind of relate things to human design, just like, I don't know. It makes sense in my mind, but like that's what was happening in that, right? It was just triggering me constantly to show me something about myself that needed to be seen. Like I needed to have awareness of my patterns because I could have easily ended that relationship after like 6 months, but would I have learned anything? You know?
Mm,
And like I feel like I repeated it so much and it didn't feel good at the time. Um but it's like now I feel like I had to get to the point where I really learned that lesson. And then
yes.
when it was over, like you said, it when it ended, it was like it ended and I felt free, right? And it wasn't like free of that person, it was free of myself, right? Free of like repeating that pattern. And it's like now, okay, now I can move forward now with awareness. Like, yes, it was like two, I don't want to say two painful years because there was beauty in it too, right? But it was like, yeah, it sucked at times because it was just like really painful because I, like you said, I wanted so badly for this person to just turn around and be like, you are everything I want. I accept you. I see you. I love you. Right. And of course, like it wasn't even really about the person, right? It was about me giving myself all those things so that I can call somebody in who would appreciate all of that.
Yeah. Oh,
But
I'm glad you said that. Yeah, and I think I can so relate to that. That
mm,
just, it sounds so familiar. It's like needing to be wanted almost, and have them commit to you for you to feel like you are enough. And it's like when they don't, you're like, why am I not good enough? Like what's
yeah.
and but it's not them triggering that in you. It's the fact that that's already within you. And so
Mm-hmm.
like, how can you feel enough now? Because when you do love yourself and when you do feel like enough and when you respect yourself that much, that like you said, you are calling in someone that feels the same about you. The reason it keeps repeating is because it's already within you and you need to learn that lesson and you need to heal from that.
Mm-hmm.
That's my view on it anyway. That's definitely what my experience has been in the same thing. Like, I was definitely triggered when we weren't together, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't get a message back straight away.
Yeah, I still struggle with that now, like in dating new people and things. Like I do find myself like I get caught in that where I'm like, oh my gosh, it's been 4 hours. They must not like me anymore. You know what I mean? But then I have to like pull myself back and be like, no, people have lives. Like this is normal. Like if I'm at work, I'm not super responsive, right? So like it's like pulling back from that. But yeah, it is. It's like I think it's just it's empowered me to kind of like more so see the patterns, you know, and like you said, like I would like mentally or energetically end things and then I would get the text message, right? Or it'd say like, I'm done. I can't do this. And then I get a text message a few days later. But like within that too, I do like respect this person for like keeping their boundary, right? Because like I pushed and I pushed and there was obviously a mutual caring there for that person to like want to continue to be in my life, right? And sometimes my mind was just like, if you don't care the way I want you to care, just like fuck off. Like, what are you still doing, right? But again, it's all for a reason. It's all for lessons. And I do value that person in my life now that I can kind of like be out of all that stuff just for like it was like a short thing, but in my course of relationship history, I learned more from that person than like anybody else I've been with. That relationship or non-relationship changed me in ways that person will never even understand. So
Yes.
it's like for that, I have so much love for them. Like
Yeah. Yes. And when, like, oh, I can so relate to what you're saying. Like I said, the last 8 months, since December, have been the most transformative, has been the most transformative time of my life. Like, and that, like, this person, exactly as you said, has shown me more than they can ever imagine. And I tried to express that, and he didn't quite understand. I was like,
Mm,
but you don't know the work that I was doing behind the scenes. Every time that I felt triggered, every time that like I didn't get that message back straight away, I had to recognize that it wasn't you, and I didn't project that onto you. It was my own trauma from the past or my own stuff that was coming up for me to be able to heal. And I think the reason, maybe just off the top of my head, that these men have been the most transformative like parts of our lives is because we've grown into a space where we're aware enough to use it for us, to take the lessons from it and to use it to heal.
mm.
Maybe it's like in that space of awareness that we have transformed so much through that relationship. um
And I would say, I think, at least from my perspective or like what I experienced too, that person was safe. right? Like
Yes.
that person was safe enough for me to actually show up and express my emotions or like cry on them sometimes or go through the whole thing or like sit there, like you said, like, yes, I have tried to explain to this person like that because they'll sometimes like when we would have conversation be like, oh, well, I just like hurt you or I disappoint you. And like, I think they felt bad, but I'm like, but no, you don't understand like how healing that is for me, you know, and I'm not trying to sit and project it on you. I'm just trying to explain it. But past relationships, like I wouldn't say anything. You know what I mean? Like I would keep it. There was no safety to be able to process through that with somebody else. So
Yes. That's so beautiful that you said that. It's so true. It is that feeling safe enough. And I remember a moment actually early on in the relationship, you just made me think of it, that we had a conversation that was upsetting to me, and he just held space for me, and I actually started crying, but not, but both tears of like sadness from the conversation we'd had, but also like tears of joy and happiness, that I actually felt safe enough with a man to express myself in that way. And I'd never experienced that in my life before, because usually it's like you'll just be shut down,
mm,
or like, you know, this is all on you. Like the relationships in my past have been quite toxic, obviously, but like,
yeah.
um, it was beautiful to for a man to hold space for me like that. And you're exactly right. It's in feeling safe enough with a person to be able to work through that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's, yeah, I've just like had to learn, yeah, the importance of this person and then just be able to, you have to let it go. Right. And I think that that is also for me sometimes the thing that gets me, if I'm in a low and I'm like overthinking things, whatever. But like most of the time I come back to it, but it's just like having that connection and that person who can like trigger that, right? Or what word am I looking for? Trigger the healing, be a catalyst for that, all that healing, right? And they don't even understand a portion of the depth of what I felt in that relationship, right? And yeah, but you know, it just, everything happens. That's what I always come back to. I'm like, everything is exactly as it's supposed to be. Everything happens for a reason. Whether this person will ever understand the depth of what I actually feel for them, even if I express it with words, mean nothing, right? People
Yeah.
can throw around words all day. Um, but maybe that's just not meant for them to understand. That was my experience, right? And
Yeah.
so they were just the one that allowed me to like experience that and heal. So
Yeah, that's so beautiful. It's so funny. Like the guy that I was seeing, kind of like, oh, I'm so sorry that I told you that, or that I did that to you. And I'm like, no, thank you. Like, I'm so grateful that you did, because you
mm-hmm.
don't understand how impactful that was and how freeing that was for me to be put in that position. You know, there's been a couple of times like that, and when the relationship ended, I literally sat down and wrote like 2 whole pages of why I was grateful for that relationship and grateful for him. Not only did it help me find peace and contentment in what it was, and deep gratitude and appreciation for what it was, but at the same time, like, it helped me let it go as well. Like that ended beautifully. We both got everything that we needed from that relationship, and I could let it go with the knowing that that was true for us, and with love. And it
Mm-hmm.
was, yeah, it's just beautiful.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And gratitude always, I start my day in gratitude. And, you know, even in the lowest of my lows, I will sit there and if I'm like crying or if I'm just like my mind is spinning stories, I always just like kind of come back to myself and be like, I am so grateful to be in this life experiencing this right now. Even though it feels terrible, I am grateful to be able to experience it, you know? And I try and always bring gratitude. I don't always succeed in it, but I try my hardest to find gratitude for something in every moment, right? And just kind of like pull that through life because it really does. Gratitude is the attitude, but it's like, it's cheesy, but it's so true.
No, again, it's like that commitment to yourself, and coming back to love. Like, if you can commit to that every single day, that's truly what transforms things. But yeah, I'm the same. I always come back to gratitude, and I think even when I'm experiencing those like lower vibrational emotions, those darker emotions, I'm like, I'm so grateful for this, because if I didn't have this, I wouldn't feel the full contrast. So like, if
Mm,
I didn't experience sadness, I wouldn't experience the joy in such depth that I do.
yeah.
Um, so it's like, yeah, coming back to gratitude and everything is so important. And yeah, I mean, it's a constant practice. We don't always succeed. There's always going to be times where we feel a bit lower than usual, but if we can bring ourselves back to that and just have full compassion for ourselves, it's that is exactly how we show up for ourselves every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned contrast, and that's what Abraham Hicks talks about, right? It's like in the things, in those emotions, in those lows, in that lower vibrational energy, it is showing us the contrast so that we can understand what we do want. We know what we
Yes.
don't want now, right? So it's like, how can we then move forward and yeah, have gratitude or whatever, and just and call on those things that we do want. So it's like we have to have, just like anything, we have to have the duality. We have to have that contrast to like understand the things that we are calling forward and the things that we do want to manifest and the qualities that we do want to bring forth, and be able to like build our self-worth and just step into our highest version of ourselves, which I think like it's always going to be a journey. We're never fully going to get there, but but that's the beauty of it too. We can just like allow ourselves to see it.
You don't ever want to get there. Like you don't want to get there. Like there
Yeah.
is no there. If you stopped and you got there, it'd be like, okay, well now what? Now I'm
Yeah.
stagnant. Now I'm done. Like no, keep going, keep growing. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I think when you get there, right, you're an enlightened being and you're off in space somewhere on a whole different dimension, like exploring a different life. And so, but yeah. If you can leave the listeners with like 3 tips that they can take with them that, whether they're going through their healing process, whether they're feeling low vibrational energy right now, or just like anything that they can take with them from this episode to just help them move emotions and find their self-worth, what would it be?
Well, the first would have to be what we've talked about. This entire episode is just showing up for yourself. So just every day do something for you, whether that's writing down 3 things that you're grateful for, or like doing something that brings you joy every day, something that is just for you. The other thing is giving yourself the space when you do feel triggered or when you do have those emotions pop up, giving yourself that time and space to fully feel them and allow them to be fully expressed. Like, know that you're safe in that moment. Um, and lastly, it would just be like, just start small. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. Like, yeah, there are so many things you can do, but start small and just do one thing, implement one new thing every week or however, whatever feels good for you. Because it is in those small things that you do every day or every week that make the biggest difference. So, and you'll be surprised at how quickly, like a month will go by, 6 months will go by, a year, 2 years, and the transformation that you can see in that time just by doing something small every day or every week. Yeah, it makes the world of difference, and it is the most selfless thing you can do.
Mm-hmm. And my final question, if you could
Yeah,
tell yourself one thing in the lowest of the lows you've experienced, what would it be?
that you're not alone, and that like you're not the only one experiencing this, because I definitely felt really alone throughout most of my journey. Um, and that it's all going to work out better than you could have ever imagined.
Mm, I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on here. This conversation has been beautiful. And where can the listeners find you? How can they work with you? I'll leave everything in the show notes, but if you want to just let them know.
Yeah, definitely the best place to find me is on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at it's Tara Swann. So ITSTARASWANN. It's Tara Swann. Yeah, Instagram's definitely the best place to find me, and I've got so much content on there. Like I post almost every day, so go and check all that out as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on here. It's been
Yeah.
amazing.